Hey guys, welcome to Fast Keto. I'm your host, Ketogenic Girl.
Hey guys, welcome to the latest episode of Fast Keto. This episode is brought to you as always by Ketogenic Girl. If you haven't checked out my book yet, I dropped a brand new cookbook called Keto Essentials on Amazon, and it came out in November. And the book features over 150 of my most favorite keto recipes. And it also goes into quite a bit of info on how to test yourself for ketosis, how to analyze your results, and a whole bunch of information on why keto works, because it is so important, in my opinion, to know why keto actually works for you in order to make it work for your life and to stick to it. So the book is called Keto Essentials. It's available on Amazon.com, and I'd love to hear what you think of it. So be sure to leave me a review if you have picked it up, or post any photos of your recipes, because I absolutely love seeing your creations, making my recipes come to life. So that's Keto Essentials on Amazon. Now, to get into today's episode, I mentioned I was going to talk about my recent trip to Tanzania, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Maasai, and I'm also going to give you my main tip for speeding up results on keto and getting the most out of your fasting. If you're doing any intermittent fasting, some tips there. So meeting the Maasai in Tanzania was incredible. It's really been a dream of mine to meet them. They're one of the longest surviving tribes in the world that still practice a way of life that's very similar in some ways to the way that we used to live a long time ago. And it was so crazy. We got to go to the village and spend the day with them, and they dressed us in their traditional robes. And the really cool thing for me was getting to see, obviously, how they eat. They practice and have been known to practice a ketogenic diet, and they mostly eat milk, blood from cows, and meat. And most of the meat is either goat meat or beef from their cattle. And when we were there, we saw them doing traditional barbecue of goat meat. And it actually was a barbecue. We went around the corner and they had fire going, and they were grilling the goat meat there for a special celebration. So we happened to be there on that day, which was really cool. My father-in-law got really sick from eating the goat meat, but my husband didn't. I didn't have any just because I wasn't quite sure about it, but that was a really cool thing just to see how they actually prepare the meat, because it was inside this little kind of like enclave, in the bushes. So if you pass by it, which we did when we first came in, you wouldn't even know anything was going on in there. And they do that, to protect it from predators or other animals in the area who'd be, obviously attracted by the smell of the barbecued meat. So it was really cool doing that. And then afterwards, they showed how they do this kind of bloodletting ceremony where they drain blood from the neck of the cows, and they actually mix it with milk, which kind of made my stomach turn. I kind of watched a little bit from afar, and I tried not to get sick, because it's basically their way of life. I mean, this is what they do, and obviously was not going to try the milkshake. But a couple of our guides who are with us that used to be Maasai, they did have some, and this is how they sustain themselves mostly. They do eat meat, but the goat meat that they were cooking was for a special occasion, and they mostly have cattle with them. What was interesting to me is that they have all these chickens everywhere, but they don't eat chickens, and they don't eat eggs, and they don't eat fish. And I interviewed them a little bit to ask them about this. So apparently with the fish, at one point their ancestors, some of them had died, and so they had done this funeral ceremony where they floated them in the river, And that was so that they could give their bodies back to nature. And a lot of the fish supposedly consumed their bodies, so they don't want to eat fish because it's too close of a connection to their ancestors. And then with the chickens and the eggs, with the chickens, they said that chickens are just kind of a lowly animal, and Maasai are strong, and so they associate more with eating, red meat, eating the meat, especially the beef, which is what they mostly eat, and ingesting, the goat meat as well. But for them, chickens are just kind of like lowly animals that they don't want to be associated with. So they didn't do that. And then I asked Alex, one of our tribe guides, about the eggs. And he said that they had a belief that if you eat eggs, your children are going to be born bald, which really cracked me up. But I don't know if he was just pulling my leg or not, because he was kind of a comedian. So I think he may have been just saying that to make me laugh. What's really, really interesting to me is that the Maasai have been known to have lower rates of disease compared to their peers. And some of that is changing now because they've had some droughts and changes, but they have been known to have lower rates of heart disease, especially lower rates of diabetes, of high blood pressure, high cholesterol than other Africans. A lot of this is attributed to their ketogenic diet, according to the Science Nordic article that I read in doing some of my research. They also walk quite a bit, get a lot of exercise, a lot more than some less active peers of theirs, because they are cattle herders, so they have their cattle with them all the time. What was sad to me is that their diet is now changing, because they had several major droughts in 1974, 1984, and 2009. They had some major droughts, and that caused the government to then encourage them to start farming and growing grains in order to not be so dependent on livestock. Because when the droughts happened, a lot of the Maasai tribes lost their cows. They lost big numbers of cows. So they've now started to introduce more staples. They still don't eat fruit for the most part, which is also kind of makes their diet line up with keto. And they do eat some vegetables, some nuts that they grow, and they do grow some other things such as tomatoes and grains and things so that they can sell them at the market in order to get their things that they need for day to day. So when we were there, they were showing us their beadwork, which we were able to buy some of their art while we were there. They are able to do that. They purchase also school supplies, charcoal, school uniforms, and cell phones. When I was there, I was dying to get a photo of one of them with using their cell phone, because it's just so kind of anachronistic to see them, traditional goat herders in their tribal clothing, with a cell phone in the middle of a field with their, cattle. It was kind of funny to me. Unfortunately, their diet is starting to change, and they are introducing, when I was in the village, I went inside their kitchen and they were making like a corn flour mixture that they were also eating. So they may not be so keto anymore, but they have been for a long time. And the fact that they've had lower rates of disease is really incredible compared to their African peers. Alex was telling me maybe not all of them will go this way, and because they are so traditional and they are so committed to their traditional way of life, that some of them may not go that route and will maintain the lifestyle that they've had for a long time. So that will be something to see, but it was incredible getting to meet them, and I'll be posting some photos along with this interview of our day that we spent there with them. One of the really cool things that we got to do there was donating a lot of ceramic water filters, and I know a lot of you were able to donate, so I just want to thank you again for doing that, because it was so incredible getting to just stop on the side of the road and see a bunch of Maasai or just other non-Maasai villagers getting water from, extremely muddy ponds, water sources, and we were able to give them these ceramic water filters, and they're able to have filtered water just using these really easy filters and show them how to use them. So that was an incredible experience, and really, really glad that we were able to be a part of it. So I want to talk about tips that I have for maximizing your results on keto. One of the things that I think I want to focus on in this episode is really caffeine. There's so many different opinions and takes on caffeine. A lot of people in the keto space talk about not drinking caffeine if you are doing keto. And I've always kind of said for myself personally that caffeine really didn't have much of an effect for me. I do know from my research that it can, and most of the time does, stimulate insulin. So one of the things that I've been doing this week, I've been traveling for over 4 months. I'm also traveling this week to Mallorca for a speaking engagement that I have there. But after that, I'm going to be in one place for an extended period of time. But after traveling for over 4 months, I had a lot of late nights. I did over 30 flights going on the book tour, going so many different cities, and a lot of jet lag, just a lot of stress on my adrenals. So I wanted to do a 48-hour fast and just give my adrenals all the support that they can. One of the things that you can do for that is to switch to decaf only, such as herbal teas and doing organic decaf coffee, because your adrenals, if they've been stressed by any big stressful events in your life or just overtaxed from, for example, traveling for 4 months or anything, if you notice yourself having anxiety, feeling off, feeling sluggish and tired, it can be adrenal fatigue. And I know that I've had some myself. So I wanted to give my body a break from caffeine, and I've switched to just herbal tea only and decaf for the past few weeks. I did it also when we were in Africa, except for a couple of days where I did have a small cup of coffee mixed with some hot water. I did like about a quarter cup and mixed it with hot water just because I really want to restore my adrenals. And another great way of doing that is getting to bed before 10. And I always heard this from different experts in the keto space and just in the health space in general. And I had read a book by Marcy Shimoff, I think, and she had said that in all of her interviews she had done with people about living well, one of them that stood out was if you go to bed before 10, you catch the happy train. And I love that. And I noticed for myself that if I do get to bed before 10, I tend to wake up feeling so much more restored and refreshed. But it was really hard to stick to that kind of schedule all the time. And when I did find in my research that we get our biggest fat burning and growth hormone spike right around between kind of 11 to 1. So if you're not in bed before then, if you go to bed later than that or in the middle of that, you're still going to get some of those cycles, but they're going to be a lot smaller than the one that you would get if you get to bed before 10. It's very restorative for your hormones, especially your adrenals. So I've been making an effort to do that, and not having any caffeine really helps me fall asleep faster and getting to bed faster, because I'm one of those people that sometimes lays in bed for a really long time trying to fall asleep. So in my fast, I want to talk about what I'm imbibing, and that's mostly just water, some mineral water, no lemon in my water, which I used to do, no almond milk, no nut milks of any kind. The only thing that I am having, aside from bone broth, is kind of call it Keto Girl coffee, because other terms associated with it are trademarked. But I'll do organic decaf coffee, mix it with a tablespoon of coconut oil and froth it up. And it is so creamy and delicious, and it doesn't affect insulin at all. It has zero effect on stimulating insulin. So while I am restoring my insulin sensitivity during this quick 48-hour fast, I can still have one of those in the morning. And because it's decaf, it's not stimulating insulin. Because it is just pure fat coconut oil, it's not stimulating insulin. And because of that, it's just enabling me to restore insulin sensitivity and maximize it. And also because there's no sweeteners in it, that doesn't stimulate any insulin as well. So that's one drink that I can still have and continue to restore insulin sensitivity. And that's kind of the main goal of my fast, is just doing a bit of detoxing and restoring insulin sensitivity. And most of all, giving my adrenals a lot of support through just switching from caffeinated drinks to decaf. So that's my tip for this week. It was fun to get to share with you guys about my visit with the Maasai. For years, I called it Maasai. On our trip, we learned that it's actually Maasai with 2 A's. And Tanzania is actually said Tanzania. So we learned a couple of ways of pronouncing those terms properly. It's great to be with you guys this week. Hope you have a great rest of your week. And as I mentioned earlier, this podcast is brought to you by Ketogenic Girl. And be sure to check out my brand new cookbook on Amazon called Keto Essentials. Catch you next time.
By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice, as I am not a qualified healthcare provider. Ketogenic Girl is not qualified to provide medical advice. Consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast. Prior to beginning a ketogenic diet, you should undergo a health screening with your physician to confirm that a keto diet is suitable for you and to rule out any conditions that may pose risks or that are incompatible with a ketogenic diet. A ketogenic diet may or may not be appropriate for you if you have any kind of health condition, whether known to you or unknown, so you must consult your physician if you have this condition or others. And anyone under the age of 18 should consult with their physician and their parents or legal guardian before beginning any kind of new diet or exercise regimen. Under no circumstances shall the host here, any guests or contributors to the podcast, any employees, associates, or affiliates of Ketogenic Girl be responsible for damages arising from the use of this podcast. If you do not agree, do not listen to this podcast.